Hi friends. Please subscribe and help me get my first 1,000 subscribers. It's one click for you, but for me it's a huge encouragement and motivation. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's go. The hot summer sun was already slanting toward the horizon. Jack stood at the grill in the shade of a sprawling oak tree, glancing around at the assembled guests. Sarah, his wife, circled among her co-workers, giving them her trademark smile. The whole evening had been her idea, a barbecue for new colleagues, organized to strengthen ties. Jack did not like noisy gatherings, especially with people he barely knew, but he agreed for her sake. Sarah's co-workers acted like they were at a corporate meeting, not a friendly gathering, where everyone was trying to make an impression. Conversations revolved around their projects, successes, and ambitions. Jack tried to stay out of it, confining himself to the role of silent chef, focused on grilling the steaks. As he removed the last of the meat from the grill and wiped the sweat from his face, Jack noticed Sarah gliding into the kitchen with a tray of dirty dishes. Her gait was tense, as if she was contemplating something. It was the kind of small detail that the average person probably would not have noticed. But Jack knew Sarah too well. He decided to take a little break and headed over to the dumpster to throw away the rest of the wrappers and napkins. When the lid of the container slammed shut with a thud, Jack suddenly felt a cold stab of intuition, something akin to déjà vu mixed with anxiety. His gaze involuntarily slid toward the lighted kitchen. Inside, Sarah stood at the table, her movements quick and focused. She was holding an envelope that she had apparently just pulled from her pocket. She glanced first at the back door leading to the terrace and then carefully opened the envelope. Jack retreated into the shade of a tree, watching her actions through the glass. Sarah carefully poured the contents of the envelope into the glass. Her hand slid to the spoon, and she began stirring the powder with as much concentration as if she were preparing a culinary masterpiece. Jack felt a chill run down his spine when he saw it. She glanced in his direction again, and Jack quickly pretended to fiddle with the trash can. Sarah, obviously satisfied, went back to her preparations. "Jack, are you coming soon?" Her voice sounded unexpectedly close. Sarah was standing on the doorstep, smiling so warmly and sincerely that he thought, maybe I'm just too suspicious. "Yeah, just a couple more minutes," he replied, hiding his excitement behind a slight smile. As she disappeared out the door, Jack refused to believe the worst, but something about her behavior kept him on edge. He went back to the grill, picked up the brush and started cleaning it, pretending everything was fine, but keeping a wary eye on the house. Sarah returned shortly carrying a tray of glasses. Jack noticed the very drink she had prepared. Her steps were light, as if she was sure no one had noticed anything. She set the glass on the table and, without a word, headed back to the guests. Jack froze. He knew this glass was meant for him. Whatever it was, he had to figure it out. Walking over to the table, he picked up the drink and brought it to his nose. The smell was common, but his wariness only increased. He pretended to take a sip, but really only held the glass to his lips. Sarah glimpsed him from around the corner. He felt her gaze without even turning around. She was waiting for a reaction. Jack put the glass back on the table, ostensibly already drunk, and returned to his duties on the terrace. Questions swirled in his head, but the answers remained hidden for now. As the evening drew to a close, Jack decided to wait, to watch, and, if necessary, act. When night fell, Jack lay in the dark guest bedroom, trying to keep his breathing steady. His mind was spinning, due to the suspicions that had built up during the day. He could hear the muffled sounds of footsteps, laughter, and voices coming from the living room. Sarah and her co-workers remained in the house, though the other guests had long since dispersed. Jack was not prepared for what he was about to hear. He decided it was better to wait for the moment to act for sure. His body stiffened as if frozen in anticipation, but his thoughts were simmering. The scene that had unfolded earlier in the kitchen was too strange to ignore. Why had Sarah added something to his drink and then watched him drink this one with emphasized calmness? The answers could only be here in this house. Footsteps in the hallway made his heart clench. The door to the bedroom was ajar, and a dim light filled the room. Sarah quietly approached his bed and leaned over. Jack could feel her presence. The smell of her perfume, her warm breath. She leaned closer, touched his face to see if he would wake up. He was ready. Barely perceptible twitching, he continued to mimic a deep sleep. "I'm sorry, Jack," she whispered so softly he could barely make out the words. Her footsteps drifted away, and the door closed again. Jack opened his eyes cautiously. His assumptions were confirmed. She really was up to something. After waiting about 10 minutes, he got out of bed and sneaked to the door. Opening it barely a millimeter, Jack peered into the hallway. Sarah was long gone from sight, but the light in the living room was shining through the doorway, inviting Jack to know the truth. He followed the hallway quietly, avoiding the areas where the floor creaked until he was around the corner leading to the living room. Pressing himself against the wall, he peered through the crack. The scene he saw took him by surprise. In the dim light, Sarah was sitting on the couch with Mark Hughes, her loudest and most opinionated coworker. Andrew stood opposite, holding a glass of wine and saying something, causing the others to laugh. The atmosphere was too relaxed, too intimate. Jack felt the blood rush to his face, but forced himself to remain invisible. Mark, sitting next to her, leaned in close to her ear, whispering something that made her laugh, but that laughter seemed chilling to Jack. And then came the moment that tore down the last barriers. Mark leaned toward Sarah and placed his hand lightly on her shoulder. Instead of pulling away, she leaned closer to him and whispered something in his ear. The laughter overlapping with their movements was like thunder to Jack. He watched as Andrew, shedding his jacket, stepped closer and the other men surrounded her as if on an unspoken signal. Sarah reached out to Mark, touching his face lightly, and then looked at the others with an expression of a mixture of pleasure and detachment. He wanted to scream, but the sounds stuck in his throat. A strange dance began in the room. The movements of the co-workers seemed synchronized, devoid of individuality. Sarah laughed, her voice breaking the silence, leaving a cold echo behind her. Jack tried to look away, but could not. It all seemed like a scene from an adult movie he did not want to watch. Jack hurried back into the bedroom. His breathing hitched and his hands shook, but his mind cleared. He found his phone, activated the video recording, and returned to his seat by the doorway. The camera was pointed precisely at the gathered crowd. He filmed Mark and Sarah exchanging glances during their proximity, then Andrew and his colleagues waiting their turn. The footage continued for a few more minutes, but Jack knew it was already enough. Back in the bedroom, he reviewed the video. All he needed was to make sure it was not a figment of his imagination. Every frame confirmed his worst fears. His heart pounded like a hammer. He knew he could not leave it like this. But now, at night, he could only prepare himself for the next step. The morning came quiet and serene, as if that horrible night had never happened. Jack awoke in the guest bedroom, but instead of relief, he felt heavy. The events of the previous day played over and over in his head like a broken record. He reviewed the recording on his phone several times, but it did not seem any less real. He knew this could not be delayed. The time had come. Sarah was already in the kitchen when Jack walked in, trying to look calm. Her hair was neatly gathered into a high ponytail and her movements were easy, almost carefree. She smiled at him as if nothing had happened. "Good morning, Jack," she said, keeping her eyes on the coffee maker. "You look like you did not sleep well. Is everything all right?" Jack did not answer right away, standing in the doorway and watching her. How could she act so calm, knowing he'd been in the house all night? Her behavior only added fuel to the fire of his anger. "You and I have a lot to talk about," he said, trying to keep his voice even. Sarah turned around, raising an eyebrow in feigned surprise. "Of course, darling. Is something wrong?" She looked at him with feigned concern, but her eyes remained cold. Jack stepped closer, taking his phone out of his pocket. His hands were no longer trembling and his voice was firm. "I know everything, Sarah. Everything that happened last night. I saw it all." and I recorded it on my cell phone camera. Her expression froze for a moment. He saw shock and confusion flash across her face, but she quickly pulled herself together. Her lips formed into a thin line, and then she folded her arms across her chest. "Were you following me?" she asked with cold defiance. "Taking pictures of me without permission? Did you mean it, Jack? Were you filming?" He struggled to keep himself from snapping. "I saw what you were doing with Mark and Andrew and all those, your coworkers. I saw what was going on in that living room. You want to talk about watched? Sarah, I'm not the one who overstepped boundaries here." She grinned, shaking her head as if he said something funny. "You being dramatic, as usual. Jack, it's just a job. What you saw, it's none of your business." The words stunned him. He took a step closer, looking her straight in the eye. "None of my business? Sarah, this is our home. This is our marriage. And you say it's none of my business?" She sighed like he was a schoolboy who did not understand a simple lesson. "Jack, let me explain. All of this," she waved her hand, "was necessary for my career. If it were not for me, we'd still be living in this house, barely making ends meet. I did everything I could to take us to the next level. And yes, I've had to make decisions that you may not like. But I'm in charge of this family. I decide what's right and what's wrong. You in charge?" Jack felt a wave of rage wash over him. "You justify betrayal by calling it right? You destroyed everything we had for what? For a promotion?" Sarah abruptly sets the coffee cup on the table. "Yes, for a promotion," she shouted. "You have no idea what it means to be a woman in a man's world. They would never have accepted me if I had not found a way to convince them. This is all for us, Jack. For you. For the future of our family." "The future of our family? Are you out of your mind?" His voice broke. "Do you even know what you saying? This is not about family, Sarah. This is about you. Your ambition. Your lies." She stepped closer, now looking down at him, her face contorted in contempt. "Jack, you've always been a weakling. From the very beginning. If it was not for me, you'd never have gotten anywhere. You not a man, you ballast. I've done everything I can to make our life normal, and you dare reproach me?" Her words hurt him. Jack stood silent, absorbing her anger and contempt. Suddenly he felt a strange calmness, as if all emotions had burned out. He took a step back, placing the phone on the table. "If that's what you think, Sarah," he said quietly, "then we done." She frowned, her confidence shaken. "What are you going to do?" she asked defiantly, but there was a note of uncertainty in her voice. Jack did not answer. He turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing in silence. Jack walked into the living room, but stopped at the window, looking out at the sunlight. His heart was still racing, but his thoughts were finally starting to gain clarity. He heard Sarah follow him into the room, her footsteps sounding quick and determined. She was not going to budge. "Do not you dare walk away from this conversation, Jack." Her voice grew louder, almost a shout. "If you have something to say it now." Jack turned around slowly. Her face was tense, but something gleamed in her eyes that he had not seen before: desperation. However, instead of remorse breaking through her armor, Sarah continued to attack. "You think you such a all-around hero? You recorded something on your phone and now you think you have the right to judge me?" She pointed sharply at his pocket. "You do not understand anything, Jack. It's just a game. You never understand how the real world works." "A game?" Jack grinned, bitter and cold. "You call our marriage a game? Our life? Everything we've built together?" Sarah crossed her arms over her chest and looked at him like he was a child to be taught a lesson. "I do not have to explain myself to you. You can be angry all you want, but I'm not going to apologize for doing what I think is right. You not even see that it's already ruined? Can you?" Jack took a step closer, his voice cold and harsh. "You think you in control, that you in no danger. But this time, Sarah, you wrong." Her lips trembled, but she regained her confidence immediately. "What are you gonna say? What will you do, you weakling? Walk away? Then get out, Jack. The door open. He stared at her in silence, then slowly pulled out his phone. Sarah tensed, her self-confidence slipping, and now there was a note of fear in her voice. Jack. Her tone changed, softer. Please do not do anything stupid. Let us talk. You just angry. You do not understand. I understand enough, he interrupted. You've chosen your side, Sarah. Now it's my turn. He unlocked his phone, opened the recording and, without taking his eyes off her face, sent it to the cloud storage. She went pale, realizing the copy was now out of her control. Are you out of your mind? She shouted, running up to him. You going to destroy everything. And for what? To get back at me? That's stupid, Jack. You just making it worse. Jack dodged her hands that were trying to snatch the phone. His face remained stony and his voice calm. You've already destroyed everything, Sarah. I just took the first step toward you finally taking responsibility for it. Sarah froze. She stood across from him, breathing heavily, and for the first time he saw not anger but fear in her eyes. This moment could have been a climax if he felt satisfaction, but all that was inside was emptiness. This is just the beginning, Sarah, he said quietly. Now you going to regret it. I'll show you what a weakling I am. He walked around her and headed for the door, leaving her standing in the empty living room. Her faint cry followed him. You do not understand. You would not accomplish anything with this. But Jack was no longer listening. He knew that his decision had been made and there was no turning back. The house fell into an eerie silence. Sarah was in the living room, trying to process what was happening, but Jack did not want to hear any more. He went into the bedroom, closed the door and leaned back against it, feeling his anger give way to cold determination. He was not going to take it anymore. The phone in his hand became an instrument of truth, proof that his feelings were not deceiving him. He unlocked the device and reopened the video. The faces of Sarah and her co-workers were clearly visible, as was everything that was happening. This footage was his ticket to justice. Jack spent a few minutes going through the company's contacts. He knew Sarah worked in the HR department of a large corporation, and every name he saw in the corporate address book gave him mixed feelings. He searched for an appropriate contact for a long time until he came across the name of the head of HR, Linda Marsh. Linda Marsh, Director of Human Resources. Great, Jack thought, taking a few deep breaths to calm himself down. He knew there could not be one step back. His fingers trembled, but he was certain. If Sarah ruined their marriage, he would ruin her career. He opened the email app and began writing a letter. Subject: Behavior that undermines corporate values. Dear Ms. Marsh, I feel compelled to inform you of the actions of several employees of your company that not only violate the corporate code, but could seriously damage the reputation of Halifax Industries. The attached videotape speaks for itself. Please consider this an urgent matter. Yours sincerely, Anonymous. He attached the file with the recording, checked the letter once more, and pressed send. His heart froze for a moment, then resumed its frantic rhythm. It was all done. Now the fun part would begin. The next morning when Sarah got up, she no longer exuded confidence. Jack noticed her eyes were running and her movements had become abrupt. She tried to act as if nothing had happened, but the tension in her figure gave her away with flying colors. Are not you going to tell me what you did? She finally asked, glancing across the table where Jack was leisurely drinking coffee. He looked up, his face impenetrable. I did what I had to do, Sarah. Now it's your turn to learn what it means to be truly humiliated. Sarah looked frightened, but tried to hide it. She shook her head and turned away, pretending not to care about this conversation. Jack calmly continued his breakfast, glancing at his watch. He knew that during business hours the company would start responding to his letter. And he was not wrong. Sarah's phone rang just after 10 in the morning. She froze when she saw Linda Marsh's name on the screen. Jack noticed her hands shaking as she picked up the phone. Yes, Linda? She said, trying to keep her voice steady. But from the look on her face, the conversation was not going as she expected. Jack could not hear the words, but he saw the color gradually fade from her face. After a few seconds, she stood up quickly, ending the conversation short. "I'll be right there. Trouble at work?" he asked in an innocent tone as she grabbed her bag. Sarah turned around, her eyes throwing lightning bolts. "Did you do this? Did you send something to work, you bastard?" she hissed like a cornered animal. "You'll know when you get there, love." He replied calmly with a snide smile. She threw him a hateful look and slipped out the door, slamming it so hard the walls shook. Jack sat on the couch and stared out the window as the clock struck noon. He imagined the events now unfolding in the Halifax Industries office. He thought he could hear the hum of voices, the gossip of co-workers discussing the video. Sarah did not get home until late afternoon. Her face was pale, her eyes red, as if she'd spent all day crying. She walked in silently, threw her bag on the floor, and collapsed on the couch. She sat with her head down for a few minutes, then finally raised her eyes to Jack. "They suspended me," she said in a hoarse voice, "until they investigate." Jack looked at her without pity. "This is just the beginning." Sarah stood up, shaking her head as if she could not believe what was happening. "You've ruined everything, Jack. Everything. You do not even realize what that means." "No, Sarah," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "You ruined everything. I just showed everyone the truth." Sarah slammed her fist down on the back of the couch with force. Her face contorted with a mixture of anger and despair. She slowly approached Jack, her eyes burning with hatred. "You think you a hero, do not you? You think you won?" she hissed. "But you know what? You just a weakling who could not handle reality. You were a loser before me, Jack, and you'll always be a loser." Jack sat silent, his gaze fixed, as if her words no longer had power over him. He rose from the couch and stood directly in front of her with his hands in his pockets. His voice was as cold as steel. "Perhaps, Sarah, I've been a weakling. Perhaps I believed in you for too long. But now I see who you really are. And you've lost everything, me, our family, your career. This is your reality now." Her lips trembled, but she quickly pulled herself together. She took a step back, throwing him a look of contempt. "You think I needed you? I built this life on my own. Without you. And I will rebuild everything you destroyed. Without you." Jack hummed and turned to the window. "Then start right now, Sarah. But know this, no one who saw that video will forget. And they certainly would not forgive you." Sarah tried to say something, but her voice was gone. She grabbed her bag and walked out of the house, slamming the door loudly. Jack stood at the window, watching as her car sped around the corner. The house fell into silence. At first glance, Jack looked calm, but a storm was raging inside him. He realized that he had just done something that would change their lives forever. His emotions were mixed: relief, anger, pain, and a strange sense of emptiness. He walked over to the bar, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and sat down at the kitchen table. Re-watching the video, he no longer felt the same emotions as the first time. It was now something of a weapon to him, one that he had already used. But what was next? The phone rang, breaking the silence. The name of an old friend, Mike, the same one who had once helped him make sense of his life, popped up on the screen. Jack hesitated, but picked up the phone. "Hi, Mike." His voice was a little hoarse. "Jack, I heard." "Sarah, is it true?" His friend's voice was worried. Jack closed his eyes, pressing the bridge of his nose with his fingers for a moment. "Yes, it's true. It's all out in the open. There's no turning back now. And neither do you," Mike pointed out. "Look, you're on edge right now, but you need to think about what happens next. Do you want this to define your life? Or are you ready to move on?" Jack was silent, mulling over his friend's words. He realized that this battle was over, but life went on. He had something new to build from the rubble of what had once been their life together. "You're right, Mike. It's time to move on," he finally said, his voice more confident. Hanging up the phone, Jack stepped out onto the porch, breathing in the cool evening air. His heart was still heavy, but for the first time in a long time he felt a faint glimmer of hope. Yes, Sarah had chosen her path and he had chosen his. And no matter how hard it was, he was going to keep going. In the morning, Jack read the news headlines on his tablet. The scandal surrounding Halifax Industries was already spilling out. The morning newscasts were discussing the corporate crisis, and on social media, users were blasting the video that had miraculously ended up in the public domain. Jack was not smiling or celebrating. He just watched. When Sarah got home, her steps were heavy and her shoulders slumped. She threw her bag on the floor and collapsed on the couch. She sat in silence for a few minutes, as if gathering her thoughts, and then looked at Jack. "You got what you wanted," she whispered. "I've been suspended. They'll deal with it. Mark and the others, too. All because of you." Jack set the clipboard aside and looked at her. "All because of me? Or is it because of you, Sarah? You made a choice. Now you reaping the benefits." She bit her lip, her eyes filled with tears, but she turned away, trying to hide it. "You ruined my life, Jack." He stood up and walked to the door. "No, Sarah. You ruined our life. And I just stopped you." With those words, he walked out of the house, leaving her to sit in silence. The next day, it became known that the management of Halifax Industries had decided to fire everyone involved in the scandal to save the company's reputation. Sarah lost her job, as did Mark, Andrew, and her other co-workers. Some of their families began to crumble when the truth came out. Sarah was left alone. Her friends turned their backs on her and social media bullying began. Jack watched it all from the sidelines. He felt no joy, only cold relief. The consequences of her actions had caught up with her as he had expected. It pained him to see what their life had become, but he knew that now he could start over, without her. Jack sat on the porch of his house, looking out at the scarlet sunset. There was still the faint smell of rain in the air, and the moment seemed peaceful. But his thoughts were far from peaceful. The last few months had been a real ordeal for him. The scandal, the breakdown of his marriage, facing his own pain had all devastated him. But now, looking at the horizon, Jack felt a faint glimmer of hope. He knew he could no longer let the bitterness consume him. Sarah was out of his life, and as much as it hurt, he had to accept it as a fresh start. The next morning Jack started with a small step. He opened his laptop and searched for local courses. He had always been interested in photography, but had never found time for it. Now he decided it was worth a try. That same day, he signed up for a course called Fundamentals of Art Photography. He liked the idea of looking at the world differently, through a lens, looking for beauty where he had not noticed it before. His class started a week later, and on the first day Jack felt he had made the right choice. The instructor, an older man named Tom, spoke passionately about the magic of light and composition. Jack quickly became engrossed in the process, forgetting his troubles. His first work, a photograph of an old bridge at dawn, symbolized for him the transition from the old to the new. At home, Jack began to sort through old things that reminded him of Sarah. Photographs, letters, gifts, all were carefully packed away and put away in a far corner of the garage. He could not get rid of them completely, but he did not want to leave them in plain sight anymore either. The process was painful but liberating. One day, while going through boxes, he found an old map on which he had once marked the places he dreamed of visiting. Among them were Yellowstone National Park, the Grand Canyon, and the Pacific Coast. This map became a new goal for him. Jack decided that his life would now focus on realizing these dreams. Within a few months, his life changed beyond recognition. Jack started spending more time outdoors, meeting new people, and sharing his photos on social media. His work began to attract attention, and soon a local gallery offered him an exhibition. It was a surprise to him. He stood in front of his photos hanging on the gallery walls and felt proud of what he was able to accomplish. His photographs were full of life and emotion, reflecting not only nature, but his own journey from pain to healing. One evening, when the exhibition was over, Jack was sitting in a cafe, leafing through the photos on his phone. Rachel sat down at the table next to him. Her smile was warm and her gaze was sincere. "You know," she said, looking at one of his photos, You did it. You found yourself. Jack thought for a moment and smiled back. Maybe I have, yes, but this is just the beginning. Those words became true for him. He no longer felt attached to the past. Life was in front of him and he was ready for new challenges and adventures. His journey continued, and now he was in control of its direction. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, do not forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.